Hitachi. Elf Oil World Champion.
I suppose the cornerways will be out now, John, after this little excursion.
Well, by the time they vacuum all that gravel out from underneath the car, it'll be almost the end of the session. But Ayrton Senna, the man in the team that were praying for rain for Sunday's Grand Prix of Europe, out on the circuit. And Ayrton Senna is a man who revels in any condition. And we know Alain Prost, who is the pole winner here this weekend, he has expressed his feelings about racing in the rain. He's not particularly unhappy about it, but he's probably not as easy as Ayrton Senna or arguably Michael Schumacher might be. So on the second row you've got a pair of great white sharks just ready to gobble up Damon Hill and Alain Prost into Redgate. And if we have a race starting in these conditions, it's going to be, I think, well, exciting is the understatement of the day, I believe.
It's going to be some first corner, John. Ayrton Senna just about to complete his first lap, and the only man who has completed one lap, although he did go into the pits, I must say, is Fabrizio Babazza, the only man who's posted a time so far. Ukiyo Katayama just came past, and again, when Ukiyo exited that Goddard hairpin, John, he was attacking the circuit. The man feels at home, although you wouldn't have said so in Brazil, but here he feels at home in the wet.
Yes, throughout the 3 days that we've had practice and qualifying at Donington Park, he has been very impressive. He's been the more impressive of the two Tyrrell drivers. And, well, Michael Andretti about again to come out onto the circuit.
That's Carl Wendlinger. The man qualified fifth. Whoops, look in the right front. Carl Wendlinger, his best qualifying performance ever in the Sauber. And the Sauber team who said, well, there's no way we're going to get pole position here. But we've got two cars again well inside the top 10, 5th and 7th, and a very relieved Carl Wendlinger, because for the first time he's actually faster than JJ Leto.
And that's not a reflection of Carl Wendlinger as a Grand Prix driver. It's just been the way everything's been dealt to him. He's had two very difficult Grand Prix, but one thing is certain, he is every bit as quick as JJ Leto. The difference again is really in the personality and the makeup of the driver. JJ is the more outgoing of the two. Carl, a much quieter, more reserved man. But in terms of ultimate ability and speed, it's almost impossible to pick and choose.
John Alesi, the Ferrari team, who is making progress, that's for sure. And as Gerhard Berger said, well, this chassis is probably very close to be just as quick as the McLaren and the Benetton, but the engine is still a little bit of a problem. He says it's just not very drivable at the moment, and in the wet that could well be a problem. Damon Hill, another front row start, and after Brazil and South Africa, it's a change to good old British weather. I mean, it's not only wet, it's freezing cold as well.
Yeah, these conditions are just about the worst possible. And we see a Aguri Suzuki, I don't know what he's trying to do, if it's a three-point turn or maybe this is one of the new disciplines that Grand Prix drivers are going to learn, because today, if conditions remain like this, we're going to see an awful lot of cars facing the wrong way on the racetrack. And really, prudence, I think, is the right word to describe how you'd have to consider racing this afternoon.
We're about 10 minutes into this morning warm-up, and there's more and more drivers who are posting a time at the moment. Philip Elio is the quickest of them all at the moment, and Elio, as we've seen over the last couple of Grand Prix, is able to be blindingly quick, and his best finish, incidentally, is only a 6th place, but the man's got speed, John.
The man also had pole position for last year's World Sports Car Championship in the Peugeot, so he knows Donington very well, although he professes not to like it particularly, but he's been a very, very quick competitor here, both in sports cars and in his Formula One, the Larus Lamborghini. And again, Aguri Suzuki just proving that he can manage to get the car off the grass. And Aguri, we heard earlier in our commentary here from Donington, and Mike Earl was down at the Melbourne Hairpin, and we see also Thierry Boutsen at Goddard. He's spun off. Hopefully he's kept his engine running, but really the track conditions are extremely difficult, extremely treacherous. And this off-on driving style that Suzuki has, it's either like a switch, it's off or it's on, is not how you want to approach Donington Park this morning. And there we see Aguri Suzuki losing yet again the back end of his footwork Mugen. And it's really frustrating. It's really, he must sense no grip at all.
Well, Ayrton Senna is the fastest of the drivers at the moment on a 1:31.555. John Alesi is second. Michael Schumacher is currently in third place. And you're watching fourth place man Damon Hill. Eric Comas is in fifth. Gerhard Berger is in sixth. And Rubens Barrichello is in seventh position. Then it's Philippe Alliot, Andrea De Cesaris and Michele Alboreto. But Ayrton Senna currently 0.2 of a second faster than anybody else. Whoa, Eric Comas.
Eric Comas, another man, he's made contact with the tire wall, the rear of the car, you see the wing, and probably a corner has been a little deranged. And, well, there's no point being fast. You've got to keep the car on the tarmac. And this race is not going to be a race so much of speed as a race of, as I said, prudence, stealth, but primarily I believe it'll be about experience, and there's no more experience. And Aguri Suzuki once again proving that he can get his car onto, but more importantly, off the grass.
Well, John, JJ Leto is now the fastest man on the circuit, and you'll be very happy to know that Rubens Barrichello is second, Ayrton Senna is third, John Alesi is fourth, and Michael Schumacher is in fifth. But talking about the spray and the rain and the speed the cars are going, Alain Prost had some very interesting comments about that to Richard West.
Yes, Alan, we were talking the other day at a sponsor presentation, and one of the guests asked Alain how he sees in the wet, because it was very wet here on Friday, and his comments were that even at speeds of 250 kilometres per hour, he's actually guiding himself by looking for markers at the side of the track, things like the 100-metre braking boards, the tyre barriers. He says he can see absolutely nothing in front of him in these weather conditions.
Richard, the only problem is Alain should have been braking at 150 metres.
That's probably one of the reasons, Alan. In fact, he was also talking about Damon's very fast time in the wet, and Damon was doing a circuit map, and he said, as I go through this corner, I'm in fourth gear, and Alan said, well, I'm not surprised you're so quick. I take it in third, so maybe you're right, John.
Well, Mark Blundell has made it into the gravel, and he looks like he's well and truly buried in that car, effectively out for the remaining part of this 30-minute session. We're now some 12 minutes into that session, and this is going to be, I think, a familiar sight throughout the remaining 18 or so minutes. And you can see that on the grass, the amount of water that fell here on Friday was pretty bad. Saturday, a glorious day, but because the temperature remained very low, there wasn't much opportunity for any drying to take place. Well, we're seeing an unusual sight. It's Aguri Suzuki actually on the racetrack. And he's gotten round, proffers to wave yellow flags. I hope that doesn't distract you, Aguri. Good boy. All the way down Starkey Straight. And now he's got to negotiate the second gear S's. Easy to lock up a brake coming in there. And this is Mark Blundell coming into Melbourne Hairpins. Back goes one way. It's almost like a rally driver. You know, you pitch the car one way, then the other way, then back again. That pendulum effect. Well, in Grand Prix cars, you don't do that, Allard.
Well, Mark tried it and buried the car in the gravel. Well, we have a quick look at the times. It's JJ Leto, currently the fastest man on the circuit again. Then Michael Andretti, Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello in fifth, Jean Alesi is sixth, Philippe Alliot seventh, then it's Mark Blundell, Eric Comas and Andrea De Cesaris. Now let's just see what Alain Prost can do. He complained about not enough downforce, but he's on full tanks, and what can this man do in the wet?
Well, there's no driver out there who's got more feel than Alain Prost, and the way he drives a racing car is he coaxes the car around. He doesn't manhandle it around. It's a very delicate style of driving, and in these conditions, that's the kind of driving that I feel is most appropriate. But with conditions really deteriorating by the minute, you never know, you can be caught out. Just putting one wheel on one of those white strips by the curbing is enough to drag the car into a spin. Or we saw on Friday again, just at this corner here, as Coppice, when Martin Brundle and Michael Andretti also now into the grass. And I mean, this is almost turning into a farce. It's just so difficult. Drivers are not doing this. They're not being cavalier about it. The conditions are really difficult. The right front of Comas's LaRouche, you see, top wishbone bent, the wheel, massive amount of toe in, and that tractor dragging the car away to safety from Coppice corner. That's the corner that leads that double right-hand corner onto the straight.
Well, Damon Hill's come fastest, the first man to get into to break that 90-second barrier around Donington in the wet this morning. Well, we look at Michael Andretti being pushed away, Eric Comas walking away, JJ Leto still second, Ayrton Senna cross-start finish, but he had to pass Aguri Suzuki, so that will not be a very fast time. Michael Andretti is still in 4th place and Philippe Alliot is still in 5th place. But when you look at it, John, that point, that left-hander just before McLean's hit a right-hander, that is a point where a lot of drivers went off. Where you're in the wet, the car wants to turn left, or you have to turn left, you get a brake, change down, and that's a tricky point.
Well, that left-hand corner is, in these conditions, is very crucial, because you do want to have to lift off in the middle of the corner, but essentially that's what you're doing. And just the torque reaction of the engine, the weight transfer from back to front, it unsettles the car, and at the same time you're wanting to change down gear as well as brake. A combination of all those factors can encourage a car to start to go into an oversteering slide. And now, I mean, this is, very, very difficult conditions indeed. It's virtually impossible, as you come down Starkey Straight with a car ahead of you, to see where you should be braking. Now, Alan Prost was telling us, or telling Richard West, that he looks laterally, looks out to the side for reference points, brake marker points. But sometimes when conditions are now as they are, even those reference points are hard to pick up. So you're just going by your instinct, by that gut feeling you have. And I find that racing, when things are totally blind, you hear funny sounds around you. Well, Michael Andretti is frustrated. You can see him bouncing up and down in the seat. And I think he's managed to keep his engine running, because there's a lot of steam coming out from that's the overflow for the cooling system. When the temperature gets to a predetermined point, it then escapes through a pressure relief valve, and that's what you see coming out of the back of his McLaren. But I think, Michael, that's your day is finished for the moment.
Alain Prost is currently still in 11th position, and times are coming down gradually. I'm not really sure whether drivers want to be out, John, in this weather, but it's your job.
Well, I think you have to stay out, because you don't know what the conditions are going to be like for the race. And there you can see, well, those are the conditions. It's just heavier and heavier. It's important for the team to know what speed you can run at in deteriorating conditions.
Interesting, John, when you look at the car of
Katayama has spun just right in front of us, and I mean, it is almost as slippery on the circuit. Oh, and he's gone. Well, this is the type of thing we used to see Nigel Mansell do. Unfortunately, you're not seeing it on the screen, but Akira Katayama's finally, there we are on the screen. Katayama finally has got it right, and continues on his way.
Well, Damon Hill is the fastest man, and times, I think, are getting slower at the moment, because the rain is bucketing down. It's gone from bad to worse. It's basically stopped raining. It's raining very hard now. JJ Leto is still second, Senna's third, Andretti's fourth, and Alliot's fifth. That's the situation during the morning warm-up. We'll be back after these short messages here on Eurosport.
Eurosport Live.
Welcome back at a very wet Donington circuit. This is the fastest man on the circuit, Damon Hill. And Damon had some interesting comments on the radio just a minute ago, Richard.
Yes, I mean, the conditions, as you say, Alan, are changing all the time to try and get brake balance correct, because on a Grand Prix car, you can move the braking efficiency from the front to the rear axle very easily from the cockpit. And Damon was saying how difficult it is to find the balance, because just looking at the rain now, it's just raining harder and harder and harder, and I think really everybody's probably in the same boat. Very difficult to find an ideal setup.
And also we can see now we're getting into the areas of aquaplaning, and certainly on Friday when we had rain, the equal of what we see now, going down through the Craner curves, there were rivers running diagonally across the racetrack, and that caused a lot of people a lot of problems. And I think, in fact, as this rain's falling, it's getting worse than we saw on Friday. Certainly from the camera point of view, the lens is completely covered now in rain, and this is done at the Melbourne Loop. Damon Hill accelerating up to Goddard's, and I mean, the track conditions have slowed probably by 8 seconds to 10 seconds over what Damon was doing. Well, in fact, we'll just check it out because we've got the Tag Heuer Olivetti here in the pits with us. And Damon comes across the line very slowly indeed. That time, well, this was out lap 6 minutes 55, so I mean, the conditions really, really appalling.
And we begin to wonder just during that break here in our commentary booth, you know, what's going to happen if the weather is like this at 2 o'clock? I mean, while Martin Brundle's out in the spare Ligier, I'm sorry, Martin's not out in the spare Ligier because Blundell parked it in the gravel, not Martin. And the Ligier twins, who do not have a happy time here at Donington, they were complaining of lack of grip. And even yesterday afternoon, after the qualifying session, they said, like, well, we just don't know what's wrong. We just don't seem to have any grip.
Well, you see Martin Brundle very gingerly coming up into McLean's, and this is the corner we were saying had claimed a number of people on Friday. They just lost control, under braking into this right-hand corner. And then, of course, coming up into Coppice on Friday, Martin had the misfortune to run into the back of Luca Bador. Said I was blinded by the spray. I couldn't judge exactly where Bador was. The two made contact, no serious damage, more pride, I think, than mechanical damage. But, I mean, even with Michele Alboreto not running particularly quickly, it's just a whiteout. You can basically see nothing. And the nearest comparison I can make is if you're on a motorway in traffic at 70 miles an hour, you know how difficult it is. Well, these people are doing 170 miles an hour coming down Starkey Straight. Michael Schumacher very gingerly around, and there we see Fabrizio Barbazza. He's now off. I think that's also down the Craner curves. It looks like it. But look at Schumacher. I mean, he's driving around in third gear at this point.
Well, I just had Damon Hill pass again, and he went very slow indeed. He's just going round very slowly. I don't know what he's doing, just checking the situation maybe, but...
Well, 9 seconds allowed slower than the quickest lap that he's achieved. He is the quickest man so far in this 30-minute session. So the circuit approximately 9 to 10 seconds slower in the space of 10-15 minutes.
Well, Michael Schumacher out currently 6 passes. It's a bit of... doesn't mean a lot during the session, which is in weather like this. John, if you would be a team manager now, would you just go out, do a system check and pack the car up again? Would you consider that?
I think it depends very much on the situation within a team. If it was a team like Williams or McLaren, you've got the opportunity to run, because information is important. Information is what the teams are here for. At the same time, you don't want to jeopardize your equipment unnecessarily. You have to imagine that race conditions could be as bad as this at 2 o'clock. So you want to have the most knowledge available to your team and to your two drivers, that they can make whatever adjustments are necessary for those conditions.
John, I bet when you were racing, in this weather, you had a problem with visors missing up. Now, as the Williams team, they got special Arai helmets, and they got something to prevent that.
Yes, we do, Alan. We've actually now got visors with elements in them, very much like a heated rear or a front screen in a modern-day road car. And in fact, in these conditions, the drivers are actually able to use these to actually demist the visors. So whilst the vision is still impaired by the weather, they at least don't have these terrible problems of misting up on the inside as badly as they would conventionally.
But Richard, I always believed, and I was one of them as well, that racing drivers breathe such a lot of hot air, there was no need for that type of equipment in the visor.
Well, the racing drivers always say they leave that to the marketing men, John, so I think slight difference of opinion there.
Anyway, as a man who doesn't need to breathe hot air or cold air. All the skill he has is in his hands, and Andrea de Cesaris proving that also he can manage to spin his Tyrrell. Well, Ayrton Senna, who won his first Grand Prix in conditions probably as atrocious as this, way back in 1985 in Portugal, a memorable Grand Prix. I think I never saw anybody race so quickly in such bad conditions as Ayrton did that day. And well, Donington Park, a totally different circuit to Estoril, but rain is rain, and there's lots of it here at the moment.
There's still quite a few cars out. The positions on our computer are not changing. We've seen all 25 cars out so far. Of course, we had 26 yesterday, and well, Riccardo has spun off. Riccardo Patrese, who is not having a happy time at the moment within the Benetton team, has spun his brand new Benetton B193, but has kept the engine running and keeps going.
Well, somehow or other, Ayrton Senna always manages to find grip on a circuit. You never, or you very, very rarely, and I don't want to sort of tempt fate by saying this, see him overdrive in these conditions. And I was reading a piece in a Saturday newspaper, an interview with Frank Williams, and he simply said that Ayrton Senna is the best.
And then there was silence. Well, Ayrton's the only one who keeps going round. I mean, he's done more laps than anybody else at the moment. Well, did Brundle see him or did Brundle not see him? It's going to be very difficult, even in these conditions, to overtake. Although there's big speed differences, it's going to be very hard to overtake, John.
You've got to be very courageous, but very confident, because courage on its own is a dangerous thing. You've got to have the confidence to go along with it. And Ayrton Senna illustrates when he's in difficult conditions. I mean, he doesn't see a great deal. He knows where he can place his car. He knows how deep he can go into a corner in these conditions. And that's just the skill of this particular world champion. And also, of course, the car has a very sophisticated traction control mechanism, and I would think that that's working at 100% at the minute. But all those aids really are only worth the human element in the car, and in these conditions, for me, it's the man, not the machine.
Alain Prost out again. He's dropped down to 11th, but I don't think he really worries about it, because even though, John, he's not the fastest man at the moment, he's starting on the front row of the grid. As long as he can get into Redgate first, that is a bigger advantage than anything else this afternoon.
It certainly is a big advantage, Allard, but I have to say in these conditions, I would expect to see the second row of the grid surge very quickly indeed, because they know that Alan is not comfortable in wet weather, and he's not going to try and win the race in the first corner or the first lap anyway. This is going to be a 2-hour Grand Prix if it's wet. An awful lot can happen, so why try to win it in the first corner? I mean, that is something you might expect a young, immature driver to do. This guy has won 45 Grand Prix, 3 World Championships. What's he got to prove? All he's got to do is be first on the last lap. He doesn't have to worry about the other 74.
Well, and of course, in these conditions, I suppose it's, well, Ukio Katayama takes a trip through the grass. Well, the chaps like that this morning. But, John, I think the start of the race will also not only be the driver who gets that first, but basically the electronics who get you there first.
Well, traction control, Williams have got it, McLaren have got it. Benetton don't have it in the literal sense of traction control. They've got a throttle control, which is, if you like, Cosworth's version of traction control. It doesn't operate on the electronics of the engine. It operates through the throttle mechanism. More complicated, and I'm not sure if it is as efficient as what Williams and McLaren have, but certainly that benefit of traction control will help the 2 front row of the grid people. Of course, you can still override it. You can nail the throttle, get too many RPMs, and there's Christian Fittipaldi now. He's into the gravel, and it's amazing. Every time a car goes off, those little access panels on the top of the chassis pop off, whether it's just going over the gravel or whether it's going backwards. We've seen that virtually every car that's been off that access panel slides away.
Well, Christian, quick look to see whether he's done any damage. Christian Fittipaldi is actually much happier than he was in Brazil. He says, although we did not qualify where I wanted to qualify, he's qualified 16th. He said, and teammate Babassa in 20th, he said, we're much happier than we were in Brazil. The car is behaving much better, and on full tanks, the beginning of the race, we will be all right. We've got the reliability, so we should be able to get into the top 10.
I think the most important thing, well, there we see the checkered flag out for the end of this 30-minute session. The most important thing, Allard, will be those 300 yards from the start into Redgate. Getting, I'm going to say, navigating your way through Redgate is going to be the first priority everybody here has. That, I tell you, in some cases, it would be better to sit in the grid on the back row, wait 10 seconds, then go, because at least you're guaranteed you'll get round it, certainly without anybody else interfering. And it is quite conceivable that if anybody did that, they could still end up A, in the points, or conceivably on the podium.
Damon Hill ends up as fastest driver on the 1:29.208. Then it's JJ Leto, Ayrton Senna and Michael Andretti. Filippelio in 5th. Michael Schumacher is 6th. Rubens Barrichello is 7th. Jean Alesi 8th. Johnny Herbert and Alessandro Zanardi are 9th and 10th for Lotus. Then it's Alain Prost, Mark Blundell, Eric Comas, Andrea de Cesaris, Michele Alboreto, Derek Warwick, Carl Wendlinger, who puts his fastest lap in at his very last lap, Gerhard Berger, Fittipaldi and Brundle. That's the top 20.
And Allard, just for our viewers back home, suddenly we don't have clear, unbroken blue skies. This is the scene we had here yesterday at Donington Park. Unfortunately, the rain is falling. We hope by the time you return to us here that the rain will have stopped and we will begin to see a drying line at Donington Park.
Well, whatever we will see 76 laps this afternoon, or 2 hours. That is the big question. If it's like this, it might well be a 2-hour race and not 76 laps. Anyway, this was the morning warm-up. Thank you for watching Eurosport. Thank you from John Watson, Allard Kalf and Richard West. See you later on. Bye-bye.